I think we had yeah, 80 plus sign up. So we have a good group signed up today.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for including me, Ken.
All right. Well, we are live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Future in Transit Town Hall. We are joined tonight by a really great panel of folks who have been working on transit for Prince William County for a very long time. I'm Supervisor Kenny Boddye. I represent the Occoquan District on the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. I'm joined tonight by my colleague on the board, Supervisor Victor Angry, who represents the Neabsco District. I'm also joined by State Senator Scott Surovell, who represents parts of Prince William in the eastern section on the State Senate of the Virginia General Assembly. We're also joined by our great Congressman Gerry Connolly, who represents the 11th Congressional District, which I'm now a constituent of, so proud to be represented by Congressman Connolly in Congress. And we also have representatives from Prince William, DOT, DRPT, and some other support folks on the line as well. We wanted to talk about transit and transportation tonight, especially looking at our mass transit options here in Prince William County. We also have PRTC here tonight to talk about what they're offering. And so what we're going to do now is going to run through our panelists right quick for folks to do a quick introduction for themselves. And what their role has been in sort of moving transit forward for our region, and then we'll dive into some Q&A for Congressman Connolly. Supervisor Angry, you're up.
Okay, all right. Hey, that's what happened, when you just kind of go with it. This is not scripted, folks. So just so you know, we're gonna roll with this. So thank you, Supervisor Boddye, and thank you for us putting this together. Teamwork and collaborating, getting this off, because as we share these borders, many of our roadways are interacted by the same people. And that's countywide. It's a countywide issue. So I just want to say thank you for everybody being on this call. One thing I'm going to say is this. I'm really happy that we're seeing some results and some progress made with COVID-19 so that we can get back to in-person town halls. So I'm hoping that we can do this again and in person at some point so we can really see the smiling faces and really kind of have a holistic interaction with the people. Let me just say this. I heard someone say on the call a little bit earlier about the importance of transportation, and this keys into everybody, and it does. It touches to everyone. And so this opportunity for this panel to be together to discuss the future, some possibilities and some options of transportation within Prince William County, I think is a great first step. So I want to thank everybody, the panelists for being on this panel, and those that are engaged in this discussion going forward. So thank you, Supervisor Boddye.
Supervisor Angry, and I could not agree more. We share these borders, and our roadways, our traffic flow, no boundaries, no borders of jurisdictions or magisterial. So I appreciate that. Senator Surovell, you're up, sir.
I'm happy to be here. It's been an honor to represent the 36th Senate District for the last 6 years, and getting transit to Prince William County has been one of my top objectives since I started representing Prince William County. And I know Congressman Connolly's been working on it even longer than I have. He's a huge fan of Metro, which so am I. And to get to Metro, there's other transit we have to build capacity for before we get to Metro. And I think we're going to talk about all those things tonight. But I think with the current Board of Supervisors we have right now, we have a very positive environment for transit right now, and making those future investments. And I'm excited to talk to everybody about it. And just for the people on the call, if you don't know, I represent basically the town of Occoquan, a little bit of Woodbridge Road, and then I wrap around down the eastern side of Route 1 all the way to Dumfries and Triangle, and then up 234 all the way almost up to Independent Hill and Colgan High School, and then a little bit of Stafford County, and then a big chunk of Fairfax. So that's what I represent. But happy to be here to talk about transit tonight.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Senator Surovell. Congressman Connolly, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Kenny. And I want to thank you and Victor, good friends, who are doing wonderful and transformative things on the Prince William County Board. And, I can't resist. I'm so proud of what we've been able to do in Prince William County. Victor is the first person of color ever to serve in over 200 years on the Prince William County Board. And today we have a majority of people of color on that board. It's reflecting the face of our community. And I think that is a signal event and development for Prince William County. And it isn't just about, you know, how we look. It's also the experience and attitudes and values we bring to those jobs. And tonight's a great example of that. And Kenny, thank you so much for bringing us together. And Scott Surovell, thank you for your leadership. A few years ago, you and I did a town hall together on this very subject. You know, if you will indulge me, I've done a lot of work on this subject, and mostly in Fairfax County, but I've been trying to bring that experience to Prince William County. This is critical. Transportation defines everything in Prince William County. When I do a telephone town hall meeting, and I've done, 40 of them, I think, I have to wait till 8 o'clock because people in Prince William are not home yet. If I just did it with Fairfax, I could start at 7 o'clock. That hour makes all the difference in the quality of our life. It affects civic engagement. It affects, how we feel when we get home. It affects stress. It affects family life. It is profound. And what we have to do is create options for people. And transit is a key part of that economically and in terms of those options. So in Prince William County, 70% of us leave the county every day to go to work. In Fairfax County, almost 60% of us work in the county in which we live. That was not always true. It is true today because we made investments in transit. And we provide, and the most signal investment we made was the Silver Line, right? Rail to Dulles. When I got elected to the Board of Supervisors like Kenny and Victor, we did not have the Silver Line and nobody was talking about it. Everyone had given up on bringing Metro to Fairfax in a significant way. But the Dulles corridor is the single most important economic corridor in the region. And not connecting it to Metro was going to have long-term consequences. Today, we have the Silver Line up and running, and we hope in the next 6 months to get phase 2 to Dulles Airport up and running and open. Billions of dollars are now being invested in new economic development, transit-oriented development in the corridor. And I'll just show you how transformative. So before we built the Silver Line in Tysons, 150,000, only 17,000 people lived in Tysons, an area bigger than Boston, my hometown. But 150,000 people commuted there at precisely the same time every morning and went home at precisely the same time every night, all by automobile. And we were shocked at how congested and dysfunctional Tysons was. When we're finished with the Tysons plan, there'll be over 100,000 people living in Tysons who will not be using their automobile to go to work. And those that do will be going out of Tysons instead of coming into Tysons at the peak hour. So we're transforming the economic center of Northern Virginia, and we're seeing the same effect in Reston. And we're seeing a smaller but similarly impactful kind of change in Merrifield as well. Transit has made everything possible. The economic development, transit-oriented development, better mix of residential and commercial, new jobs is going to generate $1 billion in new tax revenue. That half of which will go to our schools. And it will take pressure off homeowners in terms of residential taxes. When we were looking at a new FBI headquarters for a few years ago, Prince William County put in a bid near Quantico. It was immediately thrown out by the FBI and GSA because it didn't meet the criteria of being proximate to a metro station. These are options, but they take time. If we don't make decisions now to study feasibility, to pursue the feasibility, to look at what we have to do to put things in place, it doesn't get easier. It gets harder and it gets more expensive. Now, a little bit of good news at the federal level. We're debating right now an infrastructure bill. We're also debating the long-term transportation appropriation bill. And between those two bills, there's going to be a lot of additional money for transit. And so there are going to be more opportunities for Prince William to get federal funding for whatever it is we ultimately decide we want. We've seen that transit investments work. Look at VRE. VRE, started out as a white elephant. People made fun of it. But we now have thousands of people, including Prince Williamites, who commute by VRE. And it's really created an option, but it's running up against capacity. And we've got to look at other options. And from my point of view, we should look at all options. And we should make investments in every alternative we can create so that people have choices. It won't end congestion, but it will give people relief in terms of quality of life. It will allow us to attract economic development to Prince William County instead of being, if our future right now in Prince William is we are headed to be a bedroom community for everyone else. And that will hurt our tax base. That will hurt our ability to make investments for the future in education, in human services, in law enforcement, the other things that make a community strong. And so this is critical. And maybe, we should be looking at several alternatives in terms of transit. Certainly the Route 1 corridor is a logical place for us to look at. But there are others as well, down 66 perhaps, and looking at getting to other places of economic activity in our community, and understanding that this will drive and attract more economic activity, more jobs, and we can do it smartly. We can do it smartly and make sure that whatever we develop is transit oriented, so we're minimizing additional congestion. And so I just think this is critical for the future of Prince William County, and the decisions and investments we make today will help shape the community of the future. And those folks are going to look back on us and wonder why we didn't make smart decisions or express gratitude that we did.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, Congressman, for that holistic regional scope of this, because I know you started out in local government, so you know how much it takes that time and that effort and that energy, that labor of love to get there. And I appreciate you talking about the funding that's been on the horizon from the federal government. So between yourself and Senator Surovell, I wanted to enter us into some questions about funding from the state and the federal level. And I wanted to start with you, Congressman, because not only have you been a very passionate supporter of getting funding down at Prince William from just the normal processes, but I know you've actually put in some earmarks for Prince William as well, for transit and even for some sustainability efforts. And we cannot talk about transit without talking about the intersection between transportation and sustainability and bringing down those greenhouse gas emissions by getting more people out of their cars. So if you could just talk a little bit about your earmarks, I think the folks listening would really appreciate that.
So we have revived earmarks for appropriations bills and for the transportation bill. And I've already put in several earmarks this year for Prince William County, but this is we're kind of getting our feet back in the water, so that it's relatively modest this year. But I believe that if this works well, if we have good quality projects that succeed, we're going to be expanding that. But the bigger opportunity, I think, frankly, Kenny, isn't in earmarks, because they're going to be limited. We can do some good and creative things with it, but the infrastructure bill could create new transit funding to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. We're talking very large sums of money. And that creates opportunities for communities like Prince William County if we do our planning. If we, have concrete, thought out ideas of where we want to go and what we want to do and where we want to make these investments. And so I'm a big supporter of a big infrastructure bill because America has to reinvest in itself. If you look at infrastructure at the macro level for America, we're down at 1.2% of our GDP. When John Kennedy was president, it was closer to 2.5%. And China is making the investments we're not making. But there's also, as you said, there's the environmental sustainability issue. We don't want to be building lots of new highways and expanding, willy-nilly existing highways. We may have to make improvements, of course, but don't we want to be looking at alternative modes of transportation that have a general impact on the environment, that don't contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, don't contribute to smog and respiratory illnesses, and that don't add CO2 to the atmosphere? And so we have an opportunity to do the environmental smart thing while improving quality of life for our constituents, while also making investments that will have huge economic impact. You look at a transit investment and ask yourself, what's the return on that investment? Look at downtown Washington, right? I'm old enough to remember what it was like when they were building Metro. I had moved to Washington just as they were kind of doing that. And I was a very, very young man, almost a kid. When I look at the incredible investment that has attracted, it's generated billions of dollars of activity anywhere there is a metro, and a metro station, and it pays for itself in that sense, but it takes very long time. And my hope is that with an infrastructure bill, we can kind of collapse that time frame. You look at Rail to Dulles, the first time anybody in a federal document referenced, hey, I don't know, maybe we should have a rail link to the premier international airport of the nation's capital and the nation's capital, was in 1962. We are going to cut the ribbon to open phase 2 of that line next year in 2022. Now that's 60 years. Prince William County cannot wait 60 years. We don't want to wait 60 years, but we can't afford it. So we've got to collapse that time frame. And that means good planning on our part so that we know exactly what we want, what it's going to cost, and how we're going to pay for it. It's going to be a partnership, right? So Rail to Dulles required a lot of local funding and state funding. Now the state kind of cheated and said, we're going to create tolls. We're going to use the tolls on the toll road, which are locally generated, right? I mean, people in Richmond don't pay those tolls unless they're visiting. We pay them. But that's what they dedicated as their share of the cost sharing for the Silver Line. And we got federal funding, although not a lot of federal funding. And we had to create a special tax district locally, which would be hard for Prince William because we don't have that tax base. So we're going to have to look creatively at funding. But again, my hope is that with the federal infrastructure bill we're talking about, there'll be a lot more federal funding and a higher federal share of this project than we had in the Silver Line. And maybe with a Democratic state legislature, we'll have a lot more sympathetic legislators like Scott Surovell who will help us actually get state contribution. Because from the state point of view, investing in us is investing in the golden goose. We generate the lion's share of tax revenue for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And if we can make Prince William County even more successful by making this investment, the state will reap a return as well.
Appreciate that, Congressman. Could not agree more. And thank you for that. Senator Surovell, that leads us a great segue into the state sort of funding and the state level actions you've been taking and others have been taking to really move the ball forward for transit. And I know the Congressman just accused you guys of cheating, so I could not let that go without giving you a chance to rebut that, sir.
I wasn't there when we cheated. That happened before I got elected. That was all before I got elected. I think around 2006 or 7 or so. I got elected in 09. So, but back then we also had a legislature that was also, I think, very not entirely hostile, but not very supportive of transit, and also saw Northern Virginia as a place that needed to pay for its own problems. And so that was kind of the idea back then. But first of all, Kenny, to understand, in order to get the funding for this, you have to do the planning, right? And that's exactly what this is all about. The study that we're engaged in right now is just trying to figure out what's possible, where is it possible, where do we need to focus our planning resources to start laying the groundwork, land use and zoning, and et cetera, to be able to get this transit funded and down, okay? Because in order to get funding for these projects, the governments aren't just handing out big piles of cash willy-nilly like they used to with the big dig or whatever. The federal government has a funding program called the New Starts program, and in order for funding transit, and in order to be eligible to obtain that funding, first of all, the feds only fund a maximum of 50% of the project. You're more likely to get funding if you ask for less. And of course, Congressman Connolly is working on new programs that will hopefully be easier to get. But under the existing metrics right now, you have to be able to fund the vast majority of the project with other money. But in addition, to tap that federal money, you also have to have land use strategies that are transit supportive. So you have to have densities within a half a mile of your metro stations that create walkable, livable, bikeable communities with high densities so that people will feel it necessary or to use those transit assets so they get maximum usage, so that we don't have transit assets that are underutilized. And sort of in order to lay that groundwork and whatever, you have to start your planning, you have to start your land use, you have to tell your developers, here's where you need to focus, and here's where you need to think about investing, and you need to make sure you build stick structures instead of building concrete that's a lot more expensive that you don't want to tear down, and you have to start sending those messages, right? So that's right now we're just doing the initial stuff, planning to give you guys the ability to figure out what you want to do with your comp plan to then lay the groundwork to go be able to get that federal funding. But in addition, at the state level, in 2013, we passed the first tax increase for transportation in 28 years. And what we did was we created, and subsequent to that, we passed another bill to put a regime on top of the state piece. But now we have a state funding stream and a local funding stream, or a regional funding stream. And both of those funding streams utilize objective formulas. And they look at things like how much congestion reduction you're going to get, how much environmental improvement you're going to get, how much traffic safety improvement are you going to get, and they're going to look at how much economic development you're going to get. And those projects that come up with a score, and then you take both the state funding stream and the regional funding stream, they take that score and they divide it by how much money are you asking for. And the score that gets the highest project in terms of biggest bang for the dollar are the ones that end up winning the fight for that money. Right? So if you can say, well, the federal government's going to pay for it, that helps improve your score, right? If the state, if you can get a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, that improves your score, right? And what we've seen with these formulas that we've been using now in Virginia since I think about 2015 or 16 is that the transit projects are out competing the road projects for funding because they're showing higher benefits to the community, VRE especially. Because with VRE, you can make a little tiny investment, but you get massive benefits all up and down, all the way up to DC and Arlington, all the way down to Fredericksburg, right? With small investments. And that's one of the advantages of transit. When we looked at the I-90, at the VDOT the other day, when VDOT looked at widening I-95, they decided it would be $11 billion to widen I-95 from Fredericksburg up to Prince William, but it would only be $3 billion to put that money into VRE, and you get a lot more return for the dollar on that, right? And so if you look at where a lot of the NVTA, the regional money, has been going now for like the last 3 or 4 rounds, it's been going to the Route 1 bus rapid transit project in my district up in Fairfax County. It's a $900 million bus rapid transit and road project that's going to be a 14-mile long bus rapid transit all the way from the Huntington Metro down to the Woodbridge VRE. That project has been out competing road projects in Prince William and Loudoun and other parts of Fairfax because of the benefits it shows. It's going to bring 80,000 new people to live on top of that bus line, right? And so if you want to compete in these funding streams, transit is really sort of where the future lies because it shows such great benefits. But in order for it to score well on those projects, you also have to have your land use strategy in place so that when they look at what the project's going to do, they can see it's going to generate commercial, it's going to generate jobs, it's going to generate housing, it's going to reduce pedestrian and car collisions and congestion, everything else. So, all these things we have to take into account when we plan, right? When we do this planning now, so we figure out how to do it. So I'm also hopeful that going forward, our legislature we also just passed another transportation tax increase last session. We raised gas taxes and a few other taxes because in 2019 we stole some of that money to pay for some of the metro maintenance. We restored that funding so we could invest it in capital projects like roads and transit. But I think also going forward, you're going to see a legislature that's much more favorably inclined towards investing in transit as long as we maintain our current majorities. It's not just us that's interested in this in Northern Virginia now. It's Richmond, it's Hampton Roads. They've got a light rail in Norfolk, right? A lot of the college towns want to see enhanced bus service. The investments Virginia is making in rail are making us a regional leader. So I just think you're going a national leader, actually. So I think you're going to see a legislature that's more favorably inclined to making these investments in transit. So we also don't have to bear the entire burden amongst Northern Virginia taxpayers or the taxpayers that are around the stations. So it's an evolving scene right now. And I'm really excited to see what comes out of the congressional the transportation bill, because as Congressman, that sort of tends to set the table, I think. And then after that, it's easier to plan around how much federal money is available. So,
and if I can add to that, Scott, one of the things that's bothered me about transit versus, say, highways and roads is if you look at how federal funding works with the state for highways and roads. So we have the Highway Transit Trust Fund, largely funded by gas tax, and we get a pot of money and we divvy it up among states on a very simple formula. We give it to the state and the state then decides how it wants to allocate it. It's not a complicated process in applying for it and deploying it. I mean, there are some things, of course, some criteria required, but not a lot. Contrast that with transit. The federal government really controls transit, as Scott said, very tightly. All kinds of hoops and loops you got to go through. You got to submit a financing plan and prove you can do it. You got to submit lots of environmental studies. And if you make any change, you may be required to start all over again in terms of environmental studies. You got to look at land use. You got to look at impact. You got to look at density. You got to justify ridership. We don't do any of that with highways. And so, and just look at the Silver Line. The Silver Line is a $5.5 billion project, billion. The federal government initially limited its financial participation in that project to $900 million. All the rest we had to figure out ourselves.
11 billion, I think, right?
That would be a very difficult burden for Prince William County. Now, and that's what Scott and I are both talking about. We're hoping that with the combination of the new transportation bill coming out of the T&I committee and this infrastructure bill, which is a separate bill, we might be able to make it easier to build transit and to apply and get transit funding and streamline the process and have a lot more by way of resources and federal participation. You look at the original metro in Washington, it was built with 80% federal money. Contrast that with less than 20% in the Silver Line. Now, we were able finally to get, when Obama came into office, we were able to get some other sources of federal loans and guarantees to help us. But the burden was largely on the localities to figure out the financing with state participation. And as I said at the time, and Scott's right, it was also before a Democratic legislature. The state said our share will be your toll revenue on the Dulles Toll Road, which was basically Northern Virginians paying again, rather than having the state step up saying, no, this is a good investment, we're going to invest in it. So hopefully with a better, political cooperation between the state and Prince William, we could get the state to actually pony up some money. And of course, we're going to work real hard to make sure the federal participation is a lot higher than it was in the Silver Line.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I love hearing that we're going to have more state and federal partnerships with this because, as you said, there's only so much money we can raise on the local level without
Right.
overburdening our taxpayers. And like Senator Surovell mentioned earlier, but because of some of the regional needs we've had with Vermont and some other things through MBTA, we've been having money taken away and given back, and there's less certainty there for us to invest where we need to go. That said, I know you have to head off soon, Congressman. So we did have a question for that's related to what's happening in the state, but it's a question for you specifically. In the Virginia General Assembly, HB 2118 was passed, which created a grant program to convert all of Virginia's 17,000 diesel school buses to electric once federal or private funds are identified. Congressman Connolly, do you support the Clean Commute for Kids Act or any other bill to fund electric school buses in Virginia and nationally?
To do what with the school buses?
To convert school buses
Yeah.
to electric school buses.
Diesel is dirty. It is a high pollutant. And as you know, in the metropolitan Washington area, our primary source of air pollution is diesel and regular exhaust from automobiles. I mean, we don't have a lot of heavy manufacturing here, spewing, toxic chemicals and particulate matter. And so anything we can do to convert ourselves to other technologies, electric and hybrid especially, I think is really critical. Now, both Prince William is the second largest school district in the state. Fairfax is the largest. So we're talking about a very large bus fleet. Converting that requires a lot of investment, a lot of money. We're going to have to look at how we finance that. Now, the good news is that with the COVID relief bills, and hopefully with the new transportation bill and this infrastructure bill, if we can get bipartisan support, we can be, really funneling a lot of money to state and local government in a way we haven't historically, which gives a community like Prince William a lot of options. And one of those options would be to really help finance or partner with the feds and the state to finance the conversion of our school bus fleet. But the short answer is absolutely. I mean, we've got to do it. It's a big investment, but it's one we got to do if we're gonna clean up our air and contribute to a better environment. And it's one of those big things hanging out there that we've got to tackle.
Appreciate that. And I know that our school division, Prince William County Schools, has become a leader in recent years and really moving the ball forward on that. They just won a green ribbon school award recently for their sustainability efforts.
Yeah.
That being said, I know that the question referenced a House bill, and I'm seeing that House bill was continued in a special session by the Senate. So, Senator Surovell, do you have anything to add to that as we close out that conversation?
That whole conversation got caught up in a big nasty fight about who was going to pay for the school buses and who was going to make money out of them. The Senate approach was that Dominion Resources had offered to purchase the buses, make them available to the school systems to use during the day, and then to use the massive batteries in those buses as power storage and backup for their system for emergencies and other reasons when they weren't being used by the school systems. And there was a lot of animosity within the House of Delegates to the idea that the Dominion might profit off of that, and a lot of conflict about it. And in light of that conflict, the whole thing ended up going down. Any approach ended up going down because there wasn't an agreement between the bodies about how to approach it. But Congressman Connolly is absolutely correct that diesel is one of the larger sources of pollution that we have. And when we're running these buses, running diesel by these kids on their way to school every day, and they're sitting there smelling that stuff, getting on and off the bus, it has to have some kind of an impact on their health and asthma rates and things like that. I mean, we have transportation is now the number one source of carbon. The transportation sector is now the number one source of carbon emissions in America, and we need to decarbonize and electrify our transportation infrastructure. And I think the government needs to lead the way, and school buses is the way to do it. We just have to figure out a way to pay for it because, as the congressman pointed out, the buses themselves are a lot more expensive on the front end. They're a lot cheaper to operate because they have no moving parts. All you need is like brakes and pads and some suspension, and that's about it, because the engines don't have any moving parts in them really that require any maintenance. But the charging infrastructure for the actual buses is also very expensive. And you have to put these big superchargers in at the schools that, if you do it Dominion's way, have two-way switches and things, and to build all that out just takes a lot of money. And so we have to figure out how we're going to fund those things along with all the other competing priorities we have for capital needs within our school systems. So those are the things we're trying to tease out as we come up with a solution.
You know, if I could just add to that, Kenny, about money.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in a unique moment here. And of course, there are lots of demands. And we have to be careful how we use COVID relief money, because it can't be used for recurring costs, because that money will run out in 2024. But having said that, let's look at the state of Virginia for a minute. The state of Virginia ran a surplus during the pandemic. It actually, and we thought we were going to have a deficit. In fact, we had a surplus, and a number of other states are in a similar situation. Scott, I don't know, is it $1 billion surplus, something like that?
Yeah, right now we're over $1 billion. Not including the ARPA money, but yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the state, on top of having on its own $1 billion revenue surplus after this pandemic year, the Virginia is scheduled to get another $3 to $4 billion, maybe more, from the COVID relief bills we passed. Okay, plus what I got in the CARES Act.
It has restrictions on it, though.
It has restrictions, and of course, it can't be used for recurring costs. You can't, but it does mean that there's a lot of flexibility we weren't counting on. Now, on top of that, school districts and counties and cities got a lot of money. In Prince William, my guess is the school system got, from the three bills, maybe $100 million or close to that, and the county got something more than that. And that means that we, again, have some flexibility from a budget point of view in diverting resources to, from what we were planning to do in our school and county budgets and state budget to make some other investments. And I hope we look creatively at what that money frees us up to do. It won't solve everything, and it in and of itself, maybe none of this money could be used for the purpose we're talking about, but it might be able to plug some holes or substitute money for other things. We can then use the freed up money to make these longer term investments, like replacing our bus fleet. So I would hope we really get creative about this, because we have a 2-year window here we've never had in our lives. And I don't know, Kenny or Victor, what a penny on the tax rate is worth in Prince William, but like in Fairfax, I would say that the federal money among schools in the county has got to be worth 12 or 15 cents on the tax rate. I mean, it's like we raised the tax rate that much, and that brought in that revenue. And so, my God, surely over a 2-year period between now and 2024, we can think creatively about how we might use those resources to our advantage, including in transportation and our bus fleet.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. We, in our board meeting on Tuesday, Supervisor Angry will tell you, we actually did approve our first tranche of the ARPA funding. And so we're already talking with our county executive, Chris Martino, about how to be creative in that way, where we know that we shouldn't incur any ongoing costs, like you said,
right?
But we can move that money around in ways to eventually, hopefully, invest in some capital projects, which would have a lot more interest on those bonds and what have you, and be able to do some really good things to bring us, not only make us whole, but really move the ball forward on all these issues from that standpoint. That is still related in some ways to COVID recovery, because if we are able to make our frontline communities, which rely on transit, a lot more resilient, that will help us weather future pandemics and future calamities a lot better than we did this time around. So we're
Right.
completely, you know, we're all in to make those investments, and we appreciate everything that you all have done from the federal government to bring that money down to us and through the state to make sure that we got those funds. So I appreciate it.
Super.
The last thing I want to say, because I'm going to give folks a last call, because I know that, Congressman, you have to run. Anyone watching in the chat right now have any final questions for the Congressman before we let him go? And there's a bit of a delay, so I want to give someone.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, Congressman, any parting remarks or comments from you?
Just that, when we're in local government and state government and federal government for that matter, we have to see beyond the years. We have to have people willing to make decisions they may not politically live to see the fruits of. And that's hard, but it's really important. And we are at that kind of inflection point, I think, for Prince William. Are we going to, and are we willing to make decisions we know might not pay off for a while, but are necessary for future generations, for our kids, our grandkids, and others who might move to our community? I hope we have the vision and the intestinal fortitude to do that, because otherwise we're condemning ourselves to more congestion. Imagine another 150,000 Prince Williamites on the roads with no relief, no alternatives. It's difficult to imagine that given the congestion we experience now. And making it worse would be, I think, criminal on our part, malpractice on our part, for those of us who hold elective office. So I want to thank you, Kenny, for taking the lead in this. And I want to thank my friend Scott Surovell, who's been very committed on this subject, and Victor Angry, great partner in this. And I pledge to work with you at the federal level. I come from local government, as you say, so I'm always pressing that point of view when we talk about big federal investments and programs. And we've had some real success in recent months in prevailing on that point of view. So I will continue to champion the cause. And I hope at the local level, you'll continue to pressure your colleagues to start the planning, start the feasibility, because it's already late, but tomorrow gets even more difficult and more expensive. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you so much, Congressman. As always, we appreciate your commitment, and thank you so much.
My honor. Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you, everyone. So thank you so much, Congressman. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We talked a lot about the funding and what's going on in the state and federal level. At this point, I'm going to hand it off to Supervisor Angry. But right before I do that, I'm going to introduce our more local partners going to be part of this. We have Paulo Bolita and Rick Canizales, who are our heads of our transportation department. And we have Todd Horsley, who is representing DRPT. And also, we also have Dr. Bob Schneider, who heads up our executive director for PRTC OmniRide. So Supervisor Angry, on to you, sir, and our existing sort of transit options, and talking about that first mile, last mile conversation we have that's going on locally.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Supervisor Boddye. So that was a great discussion, first of all. And here's the deal. We could do this for probably 8 hours easily. So unfortunately, we can't dig that deep into all of this. I do want to say, here's how we're going to start this. Where is Prince William County in transportation right now currently? And here's what I want the viewers to envision. We've made a lot of progress in 66 and the metro coming down. So we've seen the west end of the county more come east with transportation option from metro. We've seen down 95. We've always had the metro ending at Springfield, but we have an option to pull metro down into the county. We have the VRE. We have the Long Bridge project that's pushing the VRE through. So what we're going to talk about now is really where we are in transit, existing transit in Prince William County. Now, I'm going to finalize by saying this. Mr. Bob Schneider, our executive director for PRTC OmniRide, my district relies heavily on our bus transportation system, which can bring us, this district into the metro, into the VRE, all around the county. So holistically, we have a great network that is beginning to blossom. We still have ways to go, progress to make, So I want to open this by at least giving the floor to Bob, Mrs. Schneider, to talk about our PRTC, our OmniRide bus system, our improvements and our progress we've made to the western end of the county, coming from the eastern end, and then get into the VRE portion of that. And at the end, I'm going to open it up to questions that viewers may have on the YouTube. I'm not monitoring that, so hopefully Supervisor Boddye and Jason, if there's any questions out there, we can pull those in, okay? All right, so Bob, I'm going to give you the floor, if you will, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was a great conversation about funding, and one of our biggest challenges then turns around what do you do with it? And I think the single greatest example of where you have to do the planning and the investment is when the heel turn came at the federal level to say, okay, we want to bring back earmarks. Almost every single project picked across the country was pre-planned and engineered. We have needs for a transit hub, for example, in Manassas. You have the Prince William Courthouse there, tremendous volume of social services. It is the old town for the region. It is a great area, but it didn't get picked. And the number one reason why, it's not shovel ready. And shovel ready is going to be the thing that continues to define what transportation infrastructures happen. And that's why Prince William's done so well, is the transportation department is working hard consistently to get those road projects shovel ready. We just now are starting to pivot, and it's been under working closely with them. For example, the parking garage that'll happen over there in the Stonebridge area. So when that gets constructed, that will have a transit component. That wasn't always necessarily quite the plan. Obviously, there's been ideas about the garage, but to truly make it part of a transit hub and to do more to support the Route 1 corridor, that connection with Gideon, Dale Boulevard, and all those things that creates congestion. It's not just the congestion on the highway. It's when you get off the highway and the miles of traffic lights and all the challenges that come with that. So where are we right now? We're on the upswing. We had a really tough time about 5 years ago when fuel prices plummeted. It gutted us because there was no tax floor. So we ended up having to shave millions of dollars of services out. And it wasn't a scenario in which we were trimming fat. We were actually cutting into some bone because we had made similar reductions prior to and more reductions prior to. What has really shifted everything for us is proportionally, Prince William County used to fund, I'd say close to 70% of the operation. We have now hit a point with all of the outside, I'd say closer to 65. We are now hitting a point where within, I estimate, 3 to 5 years, they will be paying less than 35% of the operational cost. So you say, well, that's really good. That means we're stretching dollars further. Well, I-66 inside the Beltway doesn't pay for Dale City. I-66 inside the Beltway doesn't pay for the Occoquan District. We have been able to use $395 to augment Route 1 and improve some commuter services. But when we're talking about truly connecting neighborhoods and communities and building those density components, the funding resources that we're talking about aren't coming from those commuter lines in order to build neighborhoods. That is going to have to be a local resource. And that is one of our biggest challenges. At the same time, we're talking about zero emission vehicles. I think almost everyone in this call is supportive of that. So the next question is, what do you do when there are no vehicles that pump gas, but the number one source of transportation funding for transit is the motor fuels tax? So there, it's operational, but it's also financial, and they belong together. So that's why we're having these big picture conversations of where are we going. For most of the people on the call, the big questions are, is transit improving in my area? Yes. And the pandemic really threw some things around for us in the sense that we lost a lot of ridership. We lost revenue, made it a challenge to operate. I do want to give the most important shout out to the first providers that were there every single day. We never closed our doors during the pandemic. We adjusted services. Those poor guys and gals, don't wear a mask, wear a mask. Don't gather, then it was all over the place. They were there every single day and they adapted quickly, and we're thankful for all they've done. The most interesting thing is that 5 years ago, when we were looking at really cutting services back, the conversation, this is prior to my arrival at the board, was, well, why don't we just close all the local services and run only the commuter services? During the pandemic, After I'd say about 6 weeks, when everything shuffled and people had to handle what was going on, our fixed route local ridership hovered in that 50 to 65% range. On most of our routes now, we're back 75, 85%. What's missing is going to be those fun trips, right? Or the trips that gather. But in terms of the actual number of people, our essential services are still meeting the essential community needs. But meanwhile, our commuter services are where we've reduced volume. We did not reduce our local services during the entire pandemic because the ridership was there. And that should be the first tell for us to let us know that we do need to invest in it, and we need to invest where there needs to be access. The other major thing that has shifted for us as an organization, and it's always bothered me since I arrived, is that we take money from the federal government through passenger fare. So if Supervisor Angry works in Washington, D.C., he doesn't pay for transit that is the most expensive for long distance haul, traveling to the Pentagon or into D.C., State Department, et cetera. But we take that $6.90 from the federal government. So it's basically free for him to ride. But we export his job out of the county. Well, that's a real equity issue when you take a look at the constituents of Dale Boulevard and the residents along Route 1 who don't leave the county, but we were charging them. So as part of what we looked at during the pandemic is what is our ridership, what is our return on investment, and we budgeted to extend our local services fare free. We really were calling it zero fare because it's not free. The fares are just being supplanted differently. But we're in that zero fare model as a way to really start to address equity in terms of local services. We've always invested our money in our commuters because that's where the pinch points are. For the first time, we're starting to realize that we have a localized pinch point, but we're the second largest county in Virginia. We are one of the largest in the United States overall in terms of wealth and population, and we don't operate a bus on Sunday.
Yeah.
So we still have some basic foundational things that we need to look at before we start figuring out, hey, how do, when, what question I got asked, when's Metro going to open? One day. But for now, I'd like to get Sunday. And those are the kinds of things that we really do pay attention to.
Good.
One day, but let's get Sunday. So we already have plans that we've reworked to redo our Eastern services, to get increased frequencies, to really take care of local passenger services and routes. But the most important things that we've seen are the improvements in walkability, the work done in the engineering on the Route 1 corridor that doesn't make you take your life in your hands to cross the street. Yeah. We built beautiful neighborhoods like Dale Boulevard that are wonderful to drive down. They're pretty, they're picturesque. Oh, my goodness, I love the trees during fall and spring, but good luck trying to cross the street at 8:30 at night when the cars are going through at 45 miles an hour. So those are some of the safety challenges, and lighting, all of those things come together. But I did a land use presentation with the Prince William Conservation Alliance and really used the Dale Boulevard example. If you look at Dale Boulevard from what I would say, basically Barksdale, all the way up to Minnieville Road, what it is, it's a series of disconnected neighborhoods. And you could have a neighbor that lives 500 yards away as the crow flies, and you'll never see them. We counted 7 points of access into all those neighborhoods and 7 traffic lights on every single one. In order to walk to the grocery store, which was less than, I think we counted 800 feet, I would have to walk 1.7 miles unless I went through the woods. So it's not just a transit thing, it's a walkability thing. Yes. It's what are we doing to connect different parts of cul-de-sacs or cut through big picture questions. And you say, well, why does that matter? Because that's how people get to transit. They walk to transit. They access transit with their feet or with some variation of that in terms of mobility. And what are we doing to prepare and do land use and growth and development? So the small area plans are fantastic. We love those because it is density reduction. It's all of those things. The big thing you're hearing about as well is, automated vehicles and zero emission bus. We had a demonstration vehicle at our location, which was a zero emission bus just this week. But to Senator Surovell's discussion, those are very expensive. In addition to being more expensive per individual bus, the charging capacity, the infrastructure, and all the things that go with it are a big, big challenge. And we don't have that parking, when we're running that bus, we're running, especially locally, all day. So that battery storage doesn't really exist for us in some capacities. But the great news is we have found, Transit's been working at this for 20 years. We've been really waiting for two things to happen. Number one, getting the electric charging infrastructure, which is building, and secondarily, battery technology. And the proof of that is your cell phone. You didn't get a cell phone until three things had to happen. Number one, you had to have a touch screen, memory, hard drives had to be smaller, and batteries had to last. Once those three things happened, welcome iPhone. So we're in that same mode right now, and you've watched the evolution of electric cars through the Prius, right? I mean, really, they were creating propane cars, which, they were basically forklifts on four wheels. Then we moved into the hybrid model, and now you see Tesla. And so we're going to see that continuously across the market, but we're still dealing with single occupancy vehicles. And when you think about what we're building toward of density, the dream of the autonomous electric vehicle is the Jetsons. I lean back, I watch my Netflix, I catch up on some emails and hang out. The reality is autonomous vehicles don't do well at high speed. They do phenomenally well at low speed in cities. So demonstrations are in the Mosaic District. Demonstrations are on military bases, in Las Vegas, in Tucson. Phoenix. That's where they're doing the demos. That's where autonomy happens. It's not 75 miles an hour down I-66. And so that's some of the disconnects that we're still trying to understand as we migrate, and what is transit going to be? At the end of the day, it is behavioral. And until we start to realize that transit has a cool factor, the number one thing Europeans talk about when they move here consistently is transit is downgraded and it's looked down upon. In Europe, there's many great movie scenes and couples fall in love on a bus. Here, I think the only quasi love story I can really recall on transit was the end of The Graduate, where they escape and run from a wedding. Queen sings "I'm in love with my car." Weird Al sang "Another One Rides the Bus." We have this disconnect of what transit is, and that's why OmniRide really does focus on better technology, really good looking vehicles, great marketing, smart employees, fantastic drivers behind the wheel, highly trained technical mechanics so we can get reliable vehicles, because we're in competition with Ford. We're in competition with Tesla. We're in competition with motorcycles. Put all those things together, and that's what transit is fighting against. So when we start to invest and think about spending on transit and marketing and growth and development at the same rate we spend on roads and cars, you will see the pivot point. And Europe has had to do that simply because of combination of industrial revolution, land use planning, the age of their cities, and of course, big things like wars on their soil has shaped how they evolve and grow. The final thing I'll say in terms of where we're going and what we're doing, we are coming back stronger week by week. Our ridership week after week is increasing, but we are not decreasing our cleaning protocols. We are not decreasing our activities. We did lift our capacity requirements, but it's not an issue right now in that we are right at the capacity for COVID, as it were. And VRE is in a very similar situation. They're going to begin over the next week or two lifting their restrictions. But we've learned a whole lot about cleaning. We've learned a whole lot about the safety protocols, the barriers for operators, and all of those things. So customers can rest assured transit is safe. There have been tons of studies about how long you would have to spend in essence, a tube with a person that has COVID if everyone's wearing a mask. I'm not going to bore everyone with that, but I promise you this, it's way longer than your trip to the Pentagon or DC. So that focus of continuously, vaccinated population, aggressive cleaning, aggressive coordination, aggressive information, and responsiveness to issues when they happen is how we've been able to be successful. So, and I do have to shout out tremendous support. Thank you to DRPT, which 1 year ago, when we were like, oh no, what is happening? I think within less than a week, they added an additional 1 month of funding without even blinking. Gave us 1 month of our equivalent funding. Then the state came in right behind it. They've done their part. Obviously, the federal government and the county hasn't flinched whatsoever. We've done our part to manage our resources, but the county's been there to give us support. And that includes the law enforcement group, that includes emergency operations, which was essential to helping us learn and grow. And of course, the health district. So all of those things has made the last year not just a transit issue, but a community response issue. And I just wanted to say thanks to all the folks that are on this call that helped make that happen.
Yeah, and Bob, let me just say this here, because it is easy to see that we could do this for hours, because the knowledge that you just shared, it is knowledge, all right? And so fortunately we got time, but I want to say 2 points you hit that I don't know if our viewers and constituents knew, but you were spot on about government workers. You know, when I worked at the Pentagon, I had a smart card and the government paid for those funds. So I took the bus, I took OmniRide into the city, but you're right, that wasn't local funds, that was federal funds. And so it didn't benefit Prince William County when you look at how we're trying to serve our constituents down here and the benefits of that. The second thing I'll tell you is when you talked about coming into the communities, you're right. The last mile program, we didn't get a lot about that, talk a lot about that, but you know, those are issues. We all have communities that dead end, and people have to find a way out to get to our bus location. So we've had a lot of discussion about that. But before I let you go, and I think we touched on a little bit, I got one question in the question field I just want to put out, but I think you hit a little bit. What can you tell us about plans for the electrification of private and public transportation? And I think you touched on a little bit with the Jetsons comment you made about the future of where we're going with that. But you know, I don't know if you got anything extra. And Bob, I got to give you like maybe 30 seconds. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the time, but if you
it's coming quick.
Okay.
It's coming quick. Moore's law is that technology advances in a shorter amount of time. Generation 1 to Gen 2 is like a year. Gen 2 to Gen 3 is half that and half that and half that. So what you're going to see is the zero emission vehicles are going to get smarter. They're going to get more reliable, and they're going to become less expensive, which means adoption happens overnight. Final plug, I will say, WMATA just took the charge, and they've set goals to have all of their vehicle purchases be zero emission buses or vehicles by the year 2030, and to have their full fleet in that situation by 2045. So there's things we can look to as a community and build in and build upon.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I want to give Todd, Rick, and Paulo a little time to jump in on Metro. You know, the importance, you know, just some updates, all of that. And then I got a few questions for you as well. So I want to open it up, give you your time. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Angry, Supervisor Boddye. There's been a lot said tonight, and I don't think I have a lot to add to this, except for the fact that we want to make sure that you know that the county and Department of Transportation as a staff and as a department support these efforts moving forward with transit. I mean, we work with DRPT, we work with OmniRide, we work with VRE, who's not here tonight. And we're going to continue to work with everybody and hopefully Metro as we look to them coming down with a study moving forward right now that we've been talking about tonight. I know Paula will go through some of the projects that we're working for right now in the county towards transit and multimodalism, some of the studies we're doing and some of the things we're putting together to make sure that we're coordinating with Mr. Schneider, Mr. Dalton, with Mr. Horsley, and making sure that we make sure that we as a county are becoming a multimodal network. And the beginnings of that, and as you will see when we come to you with it, is the mobility plan update and planning for these things from here to what we're thinking, where we're thinking we're going to be 20, 30 years down the road. And I think some of the things that Mr. Schneider says are key to that. And I think that our mobility challenges will be different now that we've gone through a pandemic, now that we've gone through certain issues that we've done, and we're going to have to examine how that affects us, not only socially and economically, but in the transportation world and how we invest into the infrastructure that we need. So with that said, we have that vision and we're moving forward with that mobility plan. We will bring that forward to you where we will connect all these elements as a county to make sure that we're working with our stakeholders and our partners here that you see here tonight, as well as others that you don't and are not here tonight, but we will be working together to make sure that we have a comprehensive look at our transportation network as we're doing this in a multimodal, safe, and efficient environment that will create a great environment to work, live, and play in Prince William County. With that said, I'd like to introduce Paulo Bolita, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about the projects we got going on right now. And I see Supervisor Angry got a question before that, so
Well, Rick, I just want to jump in and say, listen, because I'm following the script. We got a great staff behind the scene making this magic happen, and so Todd and DRPT is going to be followed up by Kenny, Supervisor Boddye, who's going to bring him in and have some discussion. So I just want to, have Todd stand down and have the public wait a little bit, and we're going to go through our Prince William County Department of Transportation and talk a little bit. So Paulo has the floor now, and I do have a few questions for you all at the end. So I'm going to turn that back over to you, Rick. All right.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Angry. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick. Oops, sorry.
That's what happens when you're watching yourself on TV, Paulo.
I got here to see myself, but no, thank you so much. And Rick has some good points. We work with our partners, at DRPT, at NVTC, at PRTC, at VRE. We have a lot of transit partners, and we really do implement multimodal improvements. Just an example, before I talk about some of our transit-related improvements, all our roadway improvement projects, for example, anytime we widen a roadway, we implement bicycle pedestrian facilities, either a sidewalk or a trail. On top of that, we have standalone sidewalk or trail projects. For example, in your district, we have the Gemini Way sidewalk improvements that improves access to the Dale City commuter line. Supervisor Boddye, in your district, we have some sidewalk improvement projects in Woodbridge that improve access to bus stops and connects them to some of the commercial areas and residential areas. So we do look at transportation as a whole in the county. I do want to make a note of some of the major transit-related projects. We're very excited to have the Potomac and the Neabsco Garage Project. This is the county's first commuter garage project, 1,400 spaces. It'll be a major future hub for PRTC. So we're very excited, and that's underway and will be completed in 2023. We have other studies that we're very excited about. We have a project that's being recommended for funding as part of the Commuter Choice Program to expand the Horner Road commuter lot. It's the largest lot in the state of Virginia. So if funded, it'll look at expanding commuter lot and also look at ways to improve safety within the commuter lot. Most importantly, Supervisor Angry, with your direction, we have an active study to look at peak hour express lanes on major routes in Dale City. We understand the need and importance of ensuring our commuters can get to and from 95. So we're looking at ways to look at the feasibility of HOV or bus lanes on Dale Boulevard and Prince William Parkway, as well as other side streets. So we're really trying to tie in all the transit-related elements in the county, working with our partners and making sure that we're very multimodal in all our projects. And I don't want to spend too much time, but I'll hand it back over to you if there's any questions from you or the public.
Yeah, I appreciate it, because actually I have a list. So I'm going to try to get to these real quick in the interest of time, because we've had great discussion here. First question for you, Paulo. Are we changing how we plan communities such as transit-oriented development to reduce the need for car reliance?
Yes, we are. Just an example, we have our approved smart area plans. We have the Dale City smart area plan. We also have the Laning at Prince William smart area plans, both in the Neabsco and Occoquan districts. These developments and smart area plans are very transit-oriented developments. They have a dedicated transit plan, and really working closely with our partners at PRTC, we're trying to find ways to implement improvements such as high-capacity transit corridors with BRT-like improvements. So we are changing the ways we plan, so we try to be more transit-oriented, ensuring that our citizens can get to some of these transit modes moving.
And
Oh, Rick, you're muted again. Your mute went on. I heard you and then it muted. Go ahead. There you go, sir.
there you go. I'd like to just add to that the fact that we're looking at these improvements countywide, we also need to make sure that we understand that the road network improvements are necessary as we move forward with these projects. Because as the road network improvements go, the transit network can work properly within it, especially the bus service around the Dale City in the more urban areas like the Occoquan district or Potomac and Neabsco. So we understand that these areas are a special need area around the county that need an additional look at and a look at retrofitting facilities that we have as legacy roads or as rehab facilities, that we need to make sure that operational and safety improvements are included to make sure that the transit system works properly around it. And I think with your guidance, we have been asked to take a look at that and how we can improve that through the Dale Boulevard corridor, and we will be looking at doing that as well.
I just want to say, because I think Senator Surovell said it best when he talked about building wooden buildings and not concrete buildings, because in the future you want to be able to tear those down and build something next, right? So if you look at, our districts, Occoquan, Neabsco, they're older districts. And so we always have to have a way to modernize those and bring them up to modern times. So I love the term, the legacy roads, because those are some of the safety issues we have when you look at sidewalks that are literally right next to these roadways. And now more modern sidewalks are pushed back out further. They're asphalt, for running, because concrete's bad for your feet. These are things that we've learned along the way. So progress tells us evolution helps us. But I don't want to get too long on that because we got a few questions. But there's so much that can go to this that we could talk about. But I'm going to get to the questions. Okay, what are the plans for building public transit and creating more pedestrian and bike access near low-income communities? And I feel like I know the answer to that, but if I could just, so one of the things I think that as we talk about, I don't think the term low income, I think these are older communities. And so as we build in new communities, we're seeing the development actually make the $500,000 homes. Well, the homes in some of these other communities aren't $500,000 homes. They were built, at the 200, even 100,000 mark. And so these neighborhoods are just older. But I think a lot of that is what we're talking about when we talked about safer, smarter streets, and how do we do these street calming programs to bring about these things, and what does a bike system look like when you look at the trail connections? We have the Neabsco Greenway, the Occoquan Greenway, connecting those areas together for bike transit, and then really trying to build a bike path along some of these roadways. It's kind of tough, but it's something that we have to look into. So if anybody wants to chime in on that any more to that, I'll open the floor for some discussion there.
Victor, let me just say that when I first was elected in 2009, I represented the northern portion of the Route 1 corridor in Fairfax County. Mm-hmm. And partly what made me so upset was that I was born in Northern Virginia. I grew up there. My grandparents moved there in 1941, actually 1936. And I saw all the attention in Northern Virginia going to Tyson's and Reston. And I felt like the eastern part of Northern Virginia was being left behind in a lot of ways mainly by the business community was doing a lot of the leading on that. And that was when I started to scream in 2011 that we have to pay attention to the eastern part of these jurisdictions. And I pushed through the first Yellow Line study back in 2011 that has led to the almost $1 billion investment in bus rapid transit that we're currently in the process of getting in Fairfax. It only took us about a decade, but we're finally getting it. And this planning that we're doing right now is going to lay the groundwork for big investments in the eastern part of Prince William County, which is where there tends to be more concentrations of lower income housing than in the sort of the western part out there. So I think the study that we're doing right now is going to start laying the groundwork for us to be able to start making those investments, and you talked about it on our meeting yesterday when we were talking about the Blue Line. I mean, if we're going to get people onto a metro or onto VRE even, you have to deal with the first mile, last mile. You have to get people from their house to the stop and then from the stop to their job. And we have to start rethinking and as Bob mentioned a second ago, how some of these neighborhoods are designed and working on pedestrian trails, more sidewalks, more bike paths. But we also have to start working on the bus networks within these communities so that you can get on a bus and take it from somewhere in Dale City and get to the VRE station or get to what's going to be the new metro station. And because you can't just build a metro station, all of a sudden expect everybody to show up. Yeah. You just got to start laying the groundwork and building the infrastructure to get the people to these places. And so I think as we start to plan this stuff out, you're going to start seeing those kinds of investments in services and infrastructure and sidewalks and bike paths and everything else that's going to really start to improve the quality of life and bring those kinds of changes your questioner asked about.
So what you're saying, to sum up, is the "if you build it, they will come" is great for the movies, but we do realize that we have constituents that live in these inner communities that need to get out of there to these transit locations to move on to further ground. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. But thank you for that, Senator. That was a great comment. So I just have really it's 5 more questions, but I'm gonna try to be quick. And Supervisor Boddye, I'm not going to say anything. Staff, I'm not going to say anything. I'll let them answer, and I'll hold my comments to myself. How much transit funding does the county commit to transit operations outside of MBTA's 30% and 2% gas tax? Who wants to chime in on that?
I think Mr. Schneider would be but a lot of our funding is the 2% gas tax, and it is that tax. But that is a lot of funding that we were talking about in those two taxes combined. Plus, I know that Mr. Schneider will talk about some of the grants, some of the stuff, some of the other funding he gets from.
I will say to Mr. Schneider's point, he mentioned earlier about going to electric vehicles. We do rely heavily on this gas tax. So there's the kind of like, this is a great movement we're going into, but then what's it going to do for funding for a program, right?
Hold on, but the electric vehicles also pay an annual fee. That the state has added an annual fee to all electric vehicle owners to make up for the gas taxes that they're not paying. So that's one way we've started to deal with that. And in addition, another problem is higher mileage gas cars. Before I bought the Tesla that I currently drive, I was driving a Honda Civic Hybrid that I bought in 2004. I drove that for 14 years, but I was getting 45 to 50 miles a gallon while the average car was getting 23. And so one of the things we're looking at in Virginia is changing our vehicle registration fees based on cars' gas mileage. So that if your car, like my Honda Civic, paid half as many taxes per mile as other cars, you make that up when you pay your registration fee every year, so that everybody is kind of putting in the same amount when they're closer to the same amount when you're using the roads. So that's another thing we're looking at the state level.
Perfect. Mr. Sani, you want to jump in or go to the next question? I think that was really good.
The actual answer to the question is beyond the motor fuels tax, really none. Some consulting money, and of course all the time and energy the staff puts in, which certainly is well worth every penny of that. But in terms of outside revenue from the general fund, pretty much zero.
Okay. Here's one. What is being done to improve pedestrian and bicycle access to transit stops?
So let me just tell you one thing that I'm talking to people about is creating a new funding stream at the state level for projects, for bike and pedestrian projects that are not connected to road widenings. Because right now it's very hard to get state level funding for those kinds of projects because they don't often score well under the formulas I mentioned a second ago, right? I mean, bike paths don't always create lots of jobs or the kinds of things that roads or transit projects do. And so it's my hope that with a statewide funding stream available, it will incentivize localities to put in for more projects like that. You know, we've only seen a couple projects like that funded from the new funding streams we came up with. The Washington Old Dominion Bike Trail, which runs from Arlington all the way out to Loudoun County, is one of them. But anyway, I'm gonna hopefully carry a bill this year to do that, and I've started to work with some of the local Northern Virginia localities about doing that. So your all support would be helpful. I see at least one thumbs up, and I see Victor nodding his head too.
I'll do a thumbs up. I'm going to do a natural thumbs up because I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I was going to say, but can I just say,
and I think Supervisor Angry and Supervisor Boddye both know that we work hard at the county to get even those TAP grants that we can get that are federal grants that are very hard to work with sometimes to do some of these improvements. I think Supervisor Boddye has been a recipient many times on Woodbridge Road as we retrofit that road into a dual pedestrian and multi-use facility. And I know that Supervisor Angry's district and in the Absolute district through Gemini Way and some things that we did earlier on Dale Boulevard have been recipients of that. But it becomes very hard. And I'm so grateful to hear that, Senator, because it becomes very hard to fund these improvements. And sometimes we go through getting these federal funds, going through 2 years of engineering to do a 2-month construction project. And if we can get some state money and we can add some local money too, we can get these improvements done much quicker, much cheaper, much faster. So it's exciting to hear you say that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Now I want to tell you, I saw our subject matter expert, our SMEs, translations me all nodding their head when you started talking, Senator. So that's a good thing that I knew that I caught their attention and interest. Okay, where are we? Okay, this is a transportation question. In designing roads today, are we considering autonomous vehicles, bus cars, so they meet the transportation needs of tomorrow? That would just be a yes answer. I'm definitely on that. So, and then I have 2 more. So we're just going to leave that out of yes answer, but that's high priority even on my list. We even viewed the electric bus over at PRTC the other day with Bob, which was an awesome bus, by the way. So let's just get to it. If bi-directional I-95 express lanes were built in Prince William County, 6 general purpose, 4 express, could 2 lanes of Route 1 be repurposed as dedicated bus lanes between Woodbridge and Dumfries, similar to Route 1 plan for Fairfax? Right, that's my motion.
We would have to relook at that. If that ever did happen, we would have to relook at the distribution of traffic, look at models, look at data, and see if that is a possibility. If parallel, it's very difficult to come back and take away lanes that create additional capacity on it through an interstate corridor. But if that kind of major improvement was made, we would have to re-examine it, relook, and see what the possibilities are with the state.
Yeah, I would also just note that one of the things that Prince William did ahead of Fairfax was figured out what it wanted to do with Route 1, which is why you're seeing all the Route 1 widenings right now in Prince William before Fairfax. Like in Fairfax, they're just starting the road condemnations for this 2.5 mile widening they want to do. And it's not going to be, the ribbon ain't going to be cut on it for another 9 years. And wow. Prince William County has already gotten a lot of their segments widened on Route 1. And that was because Prince William County figured out what they wanted to do about 15 years before Fairfax did. And so they're much further along. But to go and now take 2 lanes of the expanded road and turn that into transit, you're probably talking about a 10 to 15 year process at a minimum and a whole lot of money. And Rick is right. Part of the problem with Route 1, I've been living this for the last 12 years, is that it's US 1, which means it's part of the federal highway system. It's a federal FHWA road. And anytime you want to do anything to it, you got to go talk to the federal government and get their blessing. And they have a whole different set of rules for that road that we don't have to deal with other roads that are state roads like Old Bridge Road or 123 or 234 or whatever. So messing around with redoing Route 1 like that, I mean, I wish we could have had that conversation about maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
If we had that conversation back then and again laid that plan,
yeah.
You'd probably be seeing bus lanes as part of Route 1 right now. But the board, when it made those decisions back then, wasn't thinking in that way. So potentially as a long-term project, we could look at that, but it's not going to be done anytime soon if we start looking at it.
I agree with you. I think that is unfortunate because honestly, it's a 40-year-ago conversation. Because if you all recall on this line, Back to the Future was a 1980s movie. And Back to the Future projected in 2020 that we would be in this place where I feel we should be today, but we're not. We didn't have those discussions back then. That's another story. So let me get to this last question.
Running our cars on banana peels and coffee grinds or something, I think, or something.
It's called a flux capacitor, Mr.
Right,
Simmons.
Okay. I just wish we were all driving DeLoreans.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that was my last question that's here. So if there's any more that's in the comment section, I'm not sure. But I think at this point, Supervisor Boddye, I've really gone over my 10 minutes. I want to get into DPRT so we can move through that. And I know this is a very great conversation we're having. So maybe we can do this again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Supervisor Angry, appreciate you taking us through the local things that are going on. Dr. Schneider, Rick and Paulo, everyone that on our staff that on the county side and our PRTC that's been doing good work to make sure that we get our local planning, our local transit network up to snuff so we can start looking at these larger planning projects that Senator Surovell has been talking about. And as I transition to letting Todd take the reins here, I know that we're scheduled to only go until 8 o'clock, but if folks are okay with it, we'd like to extend the time to around 8:15 to give Todd the time he needs to and his folks to go through their presentation, because I know that especially Senator Scott in particular has been fighting for a long time to get a large scale study like this done, so we can finally start talking about bring real mass transit to Prince William, such as BRT and of course Metro. So without further ado, Todd and your team from our DRPT partners, you have the helm, sir.
Hey, thanks. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
All right. I do have a brief presentation. If Jason can bring that up, it's 7 slides, so I will go through it as quickly as I can, and I'll tell you when to turn the slide, Jason. So good evening. I'm Todd Horsley. I'm with the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. I want to thank Supervisors Boddye and Angry for the invitation and opportunity to update all of you on the status of DRPT's Springfield to Quantico Enhanced Public Transportation Feasibility Study. So next slide, please. So DRPT was directed to undertake this study by the General Assembly in 2020. There's a piece of the legislation there that I'll just briefly read. So DRPT, in cooperation with Fairfax and Prince William counties, that's very important, shall evaluate enhanced public transportation services from the Franconia Springfield Metro Station to Fort Belvoir, Lorton, Potomac Mills, and Marine Corps base Quantico and Prince William County. And we will include a cost and feasibility of extending the Blue Line and other multimodal options such as BRT or bus rapid transit along I-95 and the US Route 1 corridor. This study needs to be completed by December 1st, 2021. We're on schedule to do that. We actually started it back in September of 2020. We will evaluate, per the what I just read, a range of multimodal transit investments in the corridor. As far as public outreach goes, we have had one virtual public meeting so far. We had an online public survey, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about some public additional comments for or additional opportunities for public comment. Before we move on, I would say that this effort really is an initial study that's going to determine the feasibility of a range of feasible public transportation options and alternatives in the corridor. Our study is not going to make recommendations on a preferred alternative, but it will provide information that local and regional policymakers can use in the future to determine which alternatives, if any of these, would be pursued further. Next slide, please. So working with a regional stakeholder group that consists of staff from Prince William County, from Fairfax County, the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, where Dr. Schneider works, the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, Virginia Railway Express, WMATA, or you might know them better as Metro, and also representatives from the Department of Defense that represent Fort Belvoir and the Quantico Marine Base. We've identified 5 potential public transit alternatives in the corridor for feasibility testing and analysis. Those are listed here. Those are extensions of Metro Rail's blue and yellow lines, a bus rapid transit or BRT alternative, VRE service enhancements above and beyond those that are already being planned. And then a 5th alternative is further enhancements to the express bus network that already exists in the corridor, primarily operated by OmniRide. Next slide, please. So this graphic shows the potential alignments that are being evaluated for the 2 Metro Rail extensions, as well as the BRT and VRE alternatives. The blue line, which extension alternative, which is shown in blue, would begin at the Franconia Springfield Metro Rail Station, and it would extend south to Quantico, generally following the US 1 corridor, but it would also serve Potomac Mills and potentially the North Fort Belvoir area. The yellow line extension alternative that we're evaluating is in gold, and that would begin at the Huntington Metro Rail Station up near Alexandria, and it would follow the US 1 with service to Fort Belvoir and the Potomac Mills area. And a yellow line extension, you know, it could be a future successor to, or perhaps it could operate in conjunction with and complementary to the Richmond Highway BRT system that Fairfax County is planning to construct between the Huntington Metro Rail Station and Fort Belvoir. The BRT alternative, which is in purple, would follow the same alignment as the yellow line alternative from Fort Belvoir to Quantico. And it would basically be an extension of the Richmond Highway BRT system that Fairfax County is planning. Then we'll go to the VRE alternative, which is in, looks like it's pink. That's the current VRE alignment, rail alignment, and that wouldn't change. But what this alternative would do it would add daily VRE trips over and above those that are already being planned to be added as a result of the Transforming Rail in Virginia program that also includes the replacement of the Long Bridge over the Potomac River. And then the express bus network that I mentioned, the enhancements to the express bus network isn't shown on this map. But as I said earlier, that alternative would really add new service to the already what is a pretty robust express network, bus network between Prince William County and activity centers in DC and Northern Virginia. And so our study will determine kind of the order of magnitude cost and the feasibility of each of these alternatives, as well as, segments of each alternative. So next slide. So how will we evaluate the feasibility of these alternatives? Each of the 5 alternatives just described, will be evaluated and will report on in the study document with respect to how well they would advance or perform in relation to each of these 6 goals. And just quickly, those are ridership potential, congestion mitigation, equity, regional accessibility and connectivity, cost effectiveness, and their development potential. So next slide. So early on in the study process, we decided to add a land use assessment component to the study, just in recognition of the fact that the study corridor doesn't currently have the development densities, either commercial or residential, that would generally be required to sustain a high capacity or fixed guideway transit system. So the land use assessment is being closely coordinated with the planning and transportation staffs at Prince William County and Fairfax County. And what it will do is produce information for the counties to use in making land use decisions in the corridor at the local level, because that's land use decisions and land use planning is really a function of local government. To date, we have identified the existing conditions in the corridor, activity centers in the corridor, and potential station locations for the Metro Rail and BRT alternatives that I identified earlier. We're now in the process of developing alternative land use scenarios for the identified potential station locations, and we're modeling and testing those scenarios. And our final study report will include the results of this land use assessment. And it will, it can be used to inform the counties of the levels and the types of future densities needed to support high capacity transit, a high capacity transit system such as the Metro Rail or a BRT. And then next slide, which is the final slide. So, we'll continue working on our analysis over the next couple of months. And we plan to have a draft study document ready for review in September. Our next public meeting will be a virtual meeting in late July, either July 26th or 27th. And then we're going to have a final round of public meetings in mid-September. And at this time, we actually plan to do in-person public meetings where we'll have a lot of visual information for everyone to look at. And we plan to do one each in Prince William and Fairfax counties. We'll also continue to meet with our elected officials group and any civic groups that, want a presentation and do events like this. And then after the draft report's completed in September, we'll publish it for public comment, likely in October. And then we'll finalize the document in November and deliver it to the General Assembly on time by the December 1st deadline. There's a lot of project information on the study website that you see there on the screen, and you're always welcome to reach out directly to me, Todd Horsley. We're our project manager, Tim Roseboom, and our contact information is there on the screen. Tim is actually online as well, so he can help me to answer any questions that you or the supervisor may have. And so again, just thanks for the opportunity to update you on this study. That was kind of an abbreviated presentation from what you would see at a public meeting, but wanted to make sure we respected everyone's time tonight.
Appreciate that, Todd. These those of us who are elected officials, myself, Senator Surovell, Supervisor Angry, we've been on these elected official meetings, and we actually did one just the other day, and they are excellent. You know, there's a lot of good outreach and a lot of good collaboration going on between the localities and DRPT on this. So I wanted to give kudos to Todd and his team for all the work that they've been doing on this. I know, again, we're over time now, and we're going to start wrapping it up, but just wanted to make sure that folks see that we are working on these issues, and it's due to the important efforts of folks like Senator Surovell, Congressman Connolly, who was with us before, that have really been moving the ball forward on these issues and getting more transit options, as Senator Surovell said, to the eastern part of the corridors of both Fairfax and especially here in Prince William for quite some time. And a lot of these conversations would not be possible without them. We're just going to go around the horn here right quick with sort of closing remarks and statements by all of our panelists. But I did want to highlight the fact that we have had a lot of good questions in the chat that I know have been coming in. We have not had a chance to address nearly as many of them as we would have liked. So I'm going to offer this up to Supervisor Angry, if, you know, maybe sometime next week, if he wants to do a Facebook Live with me, and so just run through some of these questions and, you know, consult with some of the folks that we have on this call ahead of time. So when we do that Facebook Live, we can address all those questions and maybe pick up some more along the way. What do you say, Supervisor Angry?
I'm going to use the Zoom virtual thumbs up, and I'm going to give you the thumbs up. Yes, I would definitely love to do that. So let's set it up.
Appreciate that. Yeah, because as folks can see, we have a lot of passionate, committed folks in both of our districts and throughout the county that really care about transit and transportation. We've spurred a lot of good discussion just among the folks that we have on this. And one thing I want to touch upon is my sort of quick final comments before I let everyone else have it is equity. You know, as a county, we've talked a lot about equity, and we've had some folks talk and ask about making sure that we do this in a very just way. And I mean, in, you know, some communities throughout the country, when we start talking about metro stations and high capacity transit and a lot of the development that comes with it, you know, we see gentrification. We see folks who have lived in these communities get run out because they begin to get to a point where they cannot afford to live in these areas that we're trying to serve. I know that Supervisor Angry in particular has a lot of older communities in Dale City, and the last thing we want to do is you know, drive those kind of folks out as we move to try to bring that transit network in to embrace them and give them more options. So you have our commitment as we work with the DRPT and our friends on the state and federal level. We will do this in a way that doesn't run folks out, and that we will look at that land use planning part of this and the housing chapter of our comp plan to make sure that we're doing this in a way that doesn't displace our legacy community. That said, I wanted to go around the pipe. I'll start with Senator Surovell, and we'll keep moving from there.
Thanks, Kenny. And you know, this discussion about transit, you know, is critically important to the future of Prince William County. Congressman Connolly talked about it, but if we want to make Prince William County more than a bedroom community, we got to get more high quality sort of commercial and mixed use development brought into Prince William County. That's where the future is. And it also will help more people to pay the taxes for the services we need, and more businesses to pay the taxes for the services we need. Right now, all the commercial properties in Fairfax, they get the benefit of all that property tax revenue. In Prince William, it's all residential, and every house you got has a kid in. Every other house has a kid you got to educate in it. Whereas commercial buildings, all you need is fire and police. They're a lot cheaper. We need more commercial in Prince William. And if you look around Northern Virginia, the construction cranes are all around metro stations, right? They're not in other places, and that's because that's where the future is. That's where our future. Our most competitive workers want to live. They want to live next to transit. They want to work next to transit. That's where all these companies that are trying to relocate headquarters and move and locate their businesses are looking to locate their businesses because they want to attract those workers. And so if Prince William County wants to be competitive for that, we got to bring transit to Prince William County and real, true, high quality transit. So, you know, this this study that we're doing right now is just the beginning of the discussion. And once we get back this information in December, the next step is going to be, the ball is probably going to get thrown into your all's court at the local level to try and figure out how do we want to look at revising our your comprehensive plan to figure out how we're going to lay the groundwork to start bringing this kind of transit and these jobs and these housing and all this stuff back to Prince William County. And so I'm hopeful that we're going to get some really good answers out of this so that we can really start to make some really significant improvements in the county and start making it a lot easier for people to get to work. Because right now I represent, according to the United States Census, some of the people with the longest commutes in the United States of America in my district. And it's not fair. We gotta make it easier for people to get to those jobs in DC, and we also have to get jobs closer to people in Prince William so that people don't have to spend 2 or 3 hours a day of their life in a car or something else commuting. Life's too short for that. So I know I've got good partners with you all and Congressman Connolly to get these things done. I'm really excited about what the future holds for Prince William in all these things.
Thank you for that, Senator. Rick, Paulo, any parting thoughts from you folks at our DOT?
I think our parting thoughts are the basis of what we do at the county is the comprehensive plan and how we plan our future. And we're in a great opportunity right now where we're updating the mobility section of that plan to make sure we incorporate all this multimodalism into it, including the transit element, which is a super and very important element in this plan. So I think that this is a great timing, great opportunity to be able to have these conversations and these types of conversations to understand what we need to, as a department, look at in our comprehensive planning, because that is the basis that we use to go out and fund all our projects, to go out and get money for the board to make sure that we bring those elements into the county. So with that said, I love our continued coordination and cooperation with OmniRide, VRE, and all of you. So I appreciate this time and this effort to talk about this subject. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And as Mr. Canizales just alluded to, we are in the process of updating our comprehensive plan, which includes our mobility chapter, which this all feeds into this. Transportation, transit feeds into that. So please make sure that you continue to weigh in on the comp plan updates. And when it comes to transit, we look no further than OmniRide and our partners there to help us out. So Dr. Schneider, take it away, sir.
Yeah, thank you for hosting all of this. It's a lot of technical pieces of information, but as we know about anything in life, the hard things aren't easy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be all that energy to get there. But the fact that we've had the number of people engaged, involved, very exciting. I do want to promote that we are having an OmniRide specific town hall next Wednesday night, roughly the same bat time, same bat station. Visit our website. We'll have it interactive on Zoom, or you could just chill on YouTube and enjoy yourself. But we've already been getting some questions, and we're gonna answer some of the same questions tonight because they're really great questions. But we're gonna dig a little deeper into how OmniRide goes about it, how we plan for urban development, suburban development, and some of the things that we know we can do better, but what are the things that they're holding us back that we're fighting to improve on. So we're okay with some tough questions, and we'll move forward and have a great night.
Appreciate that, Dr. Schneider. Thank you so much for all that you and your team have done to keep our folks safe during COVID, and we appreciate all the work you've done to do that.
Supervisor Boddye, can I add one thought to that? We talked about cooperation, coordination, but I also, before the night is over, like to thank you, our legislators that are actually pushing for this kind of stuff and making sure that we look at this kind of stuff and making us aware of what's going on out there and pushing for the money, the grants, the ability to study things. So we appreciate you, Supervisor Angry, Supervisor Boddye. Appreciate Senator Surovell and all his support that we have with him legislating and trying to make sure that we get that metro down to Prince William County, and appreciate Congressman Connolly. So your support is what makes us be able to implement these things. We're the implementers. You guys come up with the ideas. You guys come up with the planning. You guys come up with the money. We're just here to implement your vision. And I'm glad that we have this kind of support. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Rick. And speaking of studies, can't let that go by without plugging the STAR study that I know your office has been spearheading with the 123 corridor. I know it's not necessarily germane to Dale City, but we have that 123 corridor where between Woodbridge, I-95, and Route 1, where it's a major bottleneck for the entire region from the 995 standpoint, but it's a major sort of bottleneck for folks coming through from Fairfax and what have you. So we're looking at a STAR study, especially for that 123 Old Bridge Road intersection. And I commend Mr. Canizales for all the work he's been doing on making sure that we move through that. I heard someone talking. So Todd, Mr. Horsley, I will leave it to you before we get to Supervisor Angry to finish us out.
I'll just be very brief and just thank you again for the opportunity to, update you on our study. It's been a pleasure, working with the group we're working with, especially just want to, since the supervisors are on, I would just like to say, a special thank you to the Prince William County staff. They're very, very cooperative and very helpful, and we enjoy working with them. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Mr. Horsley. And yeah, no, I'm really looking forward. I know that Senator Surovell and I have been talking about that in-person meeting that you all will be doing down later in the summer and early fall. So looking forward to having you guys down so we can talk about this and bring this to the frontline communities we're trying to serve with this. That said, Supervisor Angry, you're the closer, sir. Let's hear from you.
Well, hey, Supervisor Boddye, thanks. Let me start by just saying this, and I'm gonna make this personal because you're Kenny, I'm Vic, and outside of all this politics, we're friends. And so I want to say, Kenny, I never thought doing a joint town hall was like, something like I really want to reach on the NEAPSCO piece and talk about it. But let me say this here. Remember on the board meetings, I said that we're one Prince William County. I'm only 1/8 of the vote. You're 1/8 of the vote. Everything we do in this county, we have to vote on. And when it comes to big things, and when it comes to road and infrastructure, that's a county issue, because to your improvement on 123 on that intersection, when you come off of that, if you take that exit, it is a nightmare trying to get across to get to 123 from that 95 exit. That is a problem. And the solution that, Rick and our Department of Transportation has come up with, that design is beautiful. And it's something we need holistically for this county. No different than the Minnieville Parkway upgrades that are going to take that from a D rating to a B rating, which I know, Rick and Paulo are excited about. But I say that to say the things that we do together as a board when we have these joint sessions are really needed. So I'm really looking forward to next week to, to furthering this and answering the questions that we couldn't get to tonight. I want to say this about your staff and my staff. Behind the scenes, what the people don't know is I'm highly impressed, because it's like a movie production here. They're feeding me information. I know what to say. It's like, so I really appreciate everything that they've done to put this together, to make this happen, the magic happen, so that we can bring this to the people. I'm such a face-to-face person, and so I don't really like the whole video thing, but I know this is COVID brought this. I want to say this about COVID. We lost a lot of people, and I always say a rose in the concrete jungle. What COVID has brought us is this opportunity to expand on some of these things. You heard Bob talk about they're going to keep those sanitary cleaning processes in place. Those have always been needed. If you look at any subway, metro, bus system, you would think we would have been doing this long ago. So I'm happy to hear him say that. For us, when we look at some of how we're even operating today, and the getting more cars off the road, because we realize that people can work from home, I think public transportation in this session here tonight is going to be a key result of what we've gone through with COVID-19. So we have to hold on to this, capture it. And so I want to thank all the panelists, all of our delegation, all of our leadership, politicians, and the people for being a part of this, because it's all of our process to get here and get better. And, I can't disrespect any board that's been before us in the many years. I can say that where we are now, it's all about evolution. And we're in the place now, as a young man told me, we have to leave this county, this country in a better place for our youth that are here today that are going to be leading this country tomorrow. And that's what we're here to do. So Thank you, Supervisor Boddye. Thank you to all the staff. Thank you to the people who are here. And thank you to every panelist that's been on this call, county staff, and in specific, because you guys got to deal with the visions that we have. Thank you, Rick, for pointing that out. And I hope the vision is worth all of what you all do. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Supervisor Angry, for those inspiring words. Vic, we work really well together. I hope we can do this again. This should be an ongoing conversation. And yeah, quick plug, Supervisor Angry and I just tentatively agreed to do a Facebook Live maybe next week to answer some of the questions. Because again, like he said, like Mr. Canizales said, we're the visionaries, we make decisions, but if not for the people, where would we be? So we want to represent you and your views on where we're going as a community. That said, I will quickly plug that I have an affordable housing town hall alongside Supervisor Franklin next week on the 23rd, because as Supervisor Angry said, we do better when we're together on these things.